Sound check. 1, 2, 3.
Advise those present at this meeting of the Board of Education for the Bass River School District in the County of Burlington that adequate notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act. Notice has been posted in the Board of Education office. Notice was also mailed to the press of Atlantic City and filed with the municipal clerk of Bass River Township. Number 5, Pledge Allegiance. Stand.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 6, approval of the agenda.
I'm actually gonna jump back to roll call here before we approve the agenda, and we'll do a second roll call. Mrs. Adams, if you could please reply to the chat that you're present. And Mrs. Bitzberger, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrich?
Present.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yep.
And Mrs. Adams replied present. Okay, we may move on to number 6.
Number 6, approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Mrs. Adams, if you could reply to the chat. Mrs. Bitzberger?
Yes. What? Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Fodor?
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrich?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Number 7, approval of the minutes. A, February 9th, 2021 regular meeting. B, February 9th, 2021 executive meeting.
I had a question on the regular meeting.
No problem, Mrs. Bitzberger. Before we do that, we just need to motion this and second it onto the floor, and then questions can be asked.
Okay, sorry.
Motion.
No problem. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fodor. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question on the minutes.
Yeah.
It mentions in the minutes that I had asked a question about the study that was being done, the cost of the study, and who was being done and who was doing it. Now that's included in the minutes, but the answer to the question is not included in the minutes. Don't you usually include the answer to the questions? And also, Mr. Folder had a question about, and I just briefly put them down, fire panel, water testing, etc. And there are no, you mentioned that he asked the question, but you don't include the answers.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be good
Sorry, go
to have the answers there that are given at the meeting? What's funny is I don't even remember asking that question, and I'd love to know the answers.
Nick did email you. I can reassure you, definitely did ask this question, and I said that I would have Nick follow up with you with some more info on the feasibility study, as it was your first meeting and you were just kind of getting caught up to speed with this info. And related to your question, Mr. Fodor or Mr. Kalak might be able to elaborate a little bit more about what's required in minutes, but I can tell you my knowledge is we're supposed to talk about or put in the minutes what was generally discussed, not word for word transcribed, is what the minutes aren't. There also is a video record of the minutes on YouTube. Mr. Kalak, can you elaborate?
No, that's correct. And if there is a question in which additional information is needed, then the minutes should just reflect that the question was asked, and then that administration will be providing that individual board member or board members with the information at a later date.
Right, but why wasn't that statement in there?
And
In your minutes?
oh, the
The only
statement
reason
that
the only reason I'm asking the question is I do minutes for another meeting, and you know, you don't just say somebody had asked the question. You usually say, well, what the result was, and that's all I'm asking. The questions that Kevin asked, I would have been very interested in the answers, but it says nothing. It says he asked the question, boom, 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 and then it goes on to the next item. And I just thought minutes were supposed to be a pretty good record of what transpired in the meeting.
Yeah, I think that they are a record of what transpired in the meeting. They're just not every detail of what transpired in the meeting. You were there when we did answer Mr. Fodor's questions because you were present at that meeting. And then
Right.
We also, again, there is a video record of the meeting as well, which can be found on YouTube, which would be, you know, exactly what happened at the meeting. But the minutes are not meant to be word for word everything that transpired. That would just be, that's kind of a gargantuan task. And as I'm your secretary for the evening, I'm typing, asking questions, answering questions, and also making sure we're going through our required roll call and voice vote. So that would be pretty difficult for me to do as well.
And Mrs. Pittsburgher, if you don't feel that the minutes accurately reflect, you know, what was discussed at that board meeting, then absolutely that's your right to bring it up and make sure that, you know, your concerns are heard as you are here. And you could always ask that the minutes be amended or, you know, additional information be provided at the next board meeting when you review that agenda prior to the meeting. So you could certainly do that.
Okay, so can I request that the minutes for the regular meeting be amended?
You could make that request. You'd have to do it as a motion, ma'am, and then say exactly what you would want to be amended. And then there'd have to be a second, and then there'd have to be a vote on that.
What we could do is, if the board wants, you could just simply, we could strike this, Paul, I guess, right? We could amend the agenda and revise the regular minutes to include more detail. Excuse me. But again, I think we are going to be general in our minutes and how they're presented and recorded. We're never going to be word for word transcribed.
That's correct. But I think what Mrs. Pittsburgher was saying, if I understand what she's saying, is that there may have been, and I don't recall what she's referring to or what Mr. Fodor's questions were from last month's meeting, but there may have been some questions that were asked and then that the minutes don't reflect that what exactly was responded. Even if it was, hey, more information is going to be provided at a later date. I think what she's saying is that there's just information in there that says, hey, this question was asked or this inquiry was made, but not exactly what happened as a follow-up. And I understand that, but again, at the same time, if the information is just saying, okay, Mrs. Pittsburgher asked X, that information was not available, but it was going to be provided by the business administrator. If that was in there, then that would be satisfactory as to what happened.
Okay, so we could definitely...
Why. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can go back to the minutes and provide more general detail on the answers that are provided. That's no problem. You tell me how you'd want to proceed, though, because these minutes are on number 7 for approval.
Yeah, I mean, there's a motion. There's a motion and a second on the table. Is that right?
Yes.
For the minute. So
yep.
It's either going to be you take a roll call vote and see what happens, or Mrs. Pittsburgher, you have the right to request that the motion be amended, and then you would have to make a motion and then tell the board exactly what that motion is on the amendment. Then there would need to be a second, then there needs to be a vote on that amended motion. That's how the Roberts rule would work on that.
I also have a correction to the minutes.
Go ahead.
What did you say, Mr.
no.
Holder?
I have a correction in the minutes on number 21 for the executive session. It says that I state that Mr. Yates and Mr. Brown were aware of something and of the petition. I did not say that. I said I believe they were. I did not accuse them of knowing. I said I believe they were. Number two, going back with what Carol just said, I was always thought that minutes at a meeting were for someone that wasn't there, walk in, township meeting, fire company, whatever it may be, ask for a copy of the minutes and know everything that was asked and what went on in that meeting.
No, sir. That's not what the minutes are for. Again, the minutes aren't an exact recitation of what happened. The minutes are kept for general knowledge and information as to points that were discussed. They're not a point by point. They're not a word by word. They're not verbatim as to what was discussed. If you see any minutes that have been released by boards, they're pretty much that way for a reason. Because if you started to get into every thing that was discussed and everything that was referenced or asked or answered in a certain way, first off, it would be extremely long, and second off, sometimes people's words get misinterpreted or what they're saying or their meaning gets misunderstood, and you don't want to go down that road.
All right, so this right now, it's on the floor for a vote for the minutes. So unless somebody would like to make a motion to amend the minutes, and then we need a second, as Mr. Fodor or Mr. Kalak said, excuse me, and then we would have to vote on the amended minutes. Or if the board wants, you can say no to this. I will make a note to add more details to these minutes, and we can have them approved at the following meeting. But that is entirely up to the board.
Or you could table. There could be a motion to table the minutes for more, to add more information to it, to accurately, reflect what the two board members are saying needs to be added.
I
I think maybe
the minutes till the corrections are made and come back to the next meeting with the minutes. With the accurate corrections.
I thought the two questions that were asked were important, and the answers were important. So I would like to make a motion to have the amendments amended to answer the questions that the two board members asked at that meeting.
So would it be it would be easier to say a motion to table the minutes for a vote on tonight's meeting so that they can be amended and then the whole board can review them prior to the next meeting and then it'd be brought up at the next meeting for a vote. Is that the motion?
Exactly, that's my motion.
Okay, so if that's Mr. Fodor's motion, someone would need to second that motion, and then you would need to vote on whether or not you want to pass that motion.
Mrs. Adams also, well, there you go. So Mr. Fodor, Mrs. Bittsberger second. All right.
Okay, then you'd have to do a roll call on that, John.
Yep. I am trying to figure out how to put these into the notes. All right. Give me one moment here, people. Okay. All right, so I just wrote a motion has been made to table the minutes until further details can be added. So that was motioned by Mr. Fodor and seconded by Mrs. Bittsberger. And roll call vote, Mrs. Adams, if you could reply yes or no to the chat. Mrs. Bittsberger,
Yes.
Mr. Fodor,
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrichs.
Yes.
Mrs. Adams replied yes. And Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Just,
So motion
Mrs. Adams. Yep, Mrs. Adams, just a heads up, you did reply privately to me I believe that we would need you to reply all so everyone can see your responses. All right. We can move on to, that motion is carried. We can move on to number 8, Mr. Schmidt.
Number 8, residents forum, agenda items only. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to comment. Each statement made by a participant is limited to 3 minutes as cited in policy number 0167. The public may comment on any item on the agenda at this time. General public comment will occur later in the meeting.
All right, so we'll pause here for a few seconds. We'll let the feed catch up and let anyone call in. Mr. Bond, we do have that up and running, correct? And do we have anybody waiting to call in?
No callers. It is on the screen right now.
Yep, so we'll just hang out here for another 30 seconds, Mr. Schmidt, before moving on to Fort Worth set. All right, I think we can move on, Mr. Schmidt. Then, Mr. Schmidt, we can move on to number 9.
Got it. Number 9, board work session.
All right, so the school ethics disclosure you should have all received at this point. We all are required to complete the school ethics disclosure, and it's a new format this year than what you've been done in the past. So for our returning board members, it is not the same. It's now a link that's going to be emailed to you, and then you're going to get like an ID, like a passcode to log into the system and complete the ethics disclosure that way. So 2 things with this one. The link should have already been emailed to you. If you didn't complete it or didn't get it, please let Nick know as soon as possible after this meeting, and we'll have that resent to you. And the second thing on that would be, if you do need assistance to complete the school ethics disclosure, please reach out to us, and we'll schedule some time to either have you come in or work on, Zoom conference or a meet to help you complete it. Special meeting date, we discussed this briefly in executive session. Well, I do think that you might have dropped off at that point. We do need to schedule a second meeting or special meeting to discuss the sale of the building. We'd like to hold this meeting sometime in the next 2 weeks if we can. We want Nick to be present for the sale of the building. We don't want it to be something that we try to crowbar into a regular meeting. I think it's something that we need to take our time on. Now, again, this would be a meeting because of the nature of the discussion. It would be mostly held in executive session closed to the public. Of course, we would hold Q&A, public comment section because we would be obligated to do so. But the discussion of the sale of the building, we're talking in an executive session. We'd like to hold this in person at the building so we can walk around, take a look at some things, and discuss the potential sale of the building. Paul, do you have anything to add here before we try to pick a date for this?
No, that's correct. The agenda would be put out like a regular agenda, call to order, flag salute, roll call, but then you go into executive session and you'd make a determination on the executive session on the agenda whether action will be taken or not taken. I'm guessing action is going to be taken here to move forward with the project, but we'll figure that out, as we're putting the agenda together. And then you'd have public comment on any items, and then you'd have adjournment. So it'd be a very brief agenda.
Yep. So when we're looking at our calendar, does the board have any days, times that would be preferential? We could do as early as next Monday, the 22nd. And I would recommend that we do this during daylight if we can. Mrs. Adams replied to the chat and said Thursdays are best for her. So if I ask the board, can you do Thursday the 25th? Would that work for everybody? And could we do, Mrs. Adams, could you do, could you do a 4 o'clock Would the 4:30, 5 o'clock be better? And the floor is open for the board here as well. Mrs. Adams said Thursday at 4 would work for her.
I'm good. 4 might be a little tight, maybe like 4:15 or 4:30.
Okay.
That time's fine. Thursday's fine with me at any time.
Okay.
Right, that would that be the,
Unfortunately, I can't commit to anything right now. I have some stuff going on that is day to day, so I'll do my best to be there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fodor. Mrs. Bitzberger?
yeah, I just wanted to reconfirm that's Thursday the 25th?
Yes. And
Okay.
Mrs. Adams, is it okay if we push to 4:15, trying to accommodate Bob on this one?
Yeah, John, why don't you do it at 4:30? That's a better time to start the meeting.
Okay. All right. So March 25th, 4:30 p.m. All right.
Okay,
All right. So we'll have this advertised and put it in the paper. And again, like Paul and I stated, mostly an executive session for the board to walk around the building. We'll finalize some details on the public comment portion with you, Paul, sometime this week.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to Family Information Night, recap. As you guys know, we did hold recently a Family Information Night for Bass River learners in Little Lake Harbor. Dr. McCooley presented some info. We did have a good turnout. There were plenty of parents on the Zoom. I took part. Mr. Fodor took part. We had some parent Q&A back and forth with Dr. McCooley. I think it was good for the parents to get some FaceTime with the new superintendent. And, we will hold more of these meetings if we need to, but I think that this one was a success. And that is all that we had for board work session. Are there any questions before we move on to new business? All right, Mr. Schmidt. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, were there any questions from the parents that centered around a particular topic on the schools?
I think they asked about it seems like the concern was more about how are Bass River students performing relative to their peers, is where the concerns were.
And how were they
Mr. Fodor,
answered?
do you recall anything else?
They were asking about the summer stuff too with the kids.
That's right. Mr. Schmidt was there as well. I apologize, Mr. Schmidt.
Yep.
Yeah, they did ask about the summer programs that we would have for the kids.
Okay, so the parents generally are concerned about their their children falling behind.
Was it compensatory learning for the summer or summer recreation?
That's a good question. I can get
learning.
you.
I thought
Yeah, I think it was learning.
it was learning.
My answer would be that they're going to be targeting learning loss in the summer, so that the summer programs that we're going to be putting out is going to be targeting all learners, helping them get caught up, compensatory learning. And I believe that we are going to have some federal funding to support some of those programs as well. So, yeah, it's not just going to be summer programs. It is going to be a full summer learning program.
Mr. Yates, I have a question.
Yep.
If that is combined with Pinelands, am I allowed to be part of that program because I'm on the board?
I will defer to Paul.
Ms. Heinrichs, what do you mean? Are you allowed to be part of that
Am
program?
I allowed to work the program?
When you say work it, you mean
Be a
to be a
teacher
teacher?
in compensatory learning in the summer.
so? If Pinelands runs a program for all the districts,
Mm-hmm.
is that what you're saying?
Or
Can
if
you
Little
be a
Lake runs a
teacher?
program for all the districts, yes.
Little Egg runs the program for all the districts.
Either or,
If
I think
Little Egg
it would
puts out
apply in either
something-
or.
And I can work it, am I allowed to do that or no because I'm on the board?
and you're only on the Bass River Board, but this would be a program that would be run through. All right, give me until tomorrow. Let me make sure, because those issues get real sticky when you start.
I know it's going to be
conflict.
under some grant money that came from Special Olympics as well. So I know you
Okay.
can't answer that right now. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
curious.
but I'll talk to Mr. Yates briefly or Mr. Brown and find the funding formula and get your response.
Thank you.
And
with
ma'am,
this-
what type of teacher are you?
Special ed.
Special ed. And do you have dual certification or just special education?
I do.
You have dual certification.
Yeah. Yes. K through 8,
Okay.
K through 12.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Will this learning take place in person or will it be virtual again?
I think they would try to have them in person, Mrs. Pittsburgher. I don't think that there's final details on it yet.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if the program's been fully announced, but once there are those details, what that looks like, we can certainly provide that information to the board in an update.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were talking about possible transportation and things like that. It was in the early stages, but they were talking about possibly transportation and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. All right, Mr. Schmidt.
Number 10, new business.
Is there any new business from the board?
Well, I have new business. I brought up last meeting to go into an executive meeting to discuss something. And after several emails back and forth with the attorney and all, Mr. Kalak, I was told that this discussion would not fall under any of the exceptions for excluding the public. In other words, discussion regarding anything related to whatever communications you received on February 9th, 2021 is not, I repeat, not to be held in executive session. So as I move forward, on February 8th of 2021 at 2:06 p.m., I received an email that was attached to the attachments from the business administrator's office, and it turns out that it is a petition, Bass River Elementary petition points. So there's 11 of them. It's a little lengthy. I had talked to the president about this. I also talked to the vice president about this, and no one has ever seen or received this. So with that being said, the only question I had is, where did it come from? And Mr. Kalak got into a lot of law things and things like that. We went back and forth and things. So evidently this came from the business administrator's office. It was attached to one of our attachments. I forget what was on the top of that attachment, but underneath was also a resume that this was sent out by mistake, and I was the only board member to get this. And, you know, if there's something that's going on and there's a petition and none of the board members or the president or vice president doesn't know about it, that's an issue. And if it's coming from the business administrator's office secretary and it's coming out on to our agenda files that we download, you know, and bring out, then where else is it going out to? Who else is going out to? So what do we do with this? Am I going to sit here and read this whole agenda? I mean, this whole petition? Or, you know, I'm not going to give up the person that sent it to me because, you know, I mean, there's privacy rights there. You know, I don't know what to do. And it's a pretty, if you actually was to read it, it could be damaging to us. It's accusations that we really shouldn't have to answer for, but eventually if it gets out, we're going to have to. I'd like to bring it up in executive session. The attorney said not to, so now here it is out in the public. So what do we do about this now? I'm leaving it up to the board. What do we do? I talked to you, Mr. Schmidt, about it. You told me you did not know anything about it.
I haven't even seen anything about any of this. You told me about it, and that's even entailed or what it's about.
Right, I did send a copy to the president so she could forward it to the attorney. And then we, like I said, we went back and forth about it. I don't know if this is something that should be emailed to all the members of the board, let them look it over and come back next meeting. What do we do?
When you say it came from the business administrator, I mean, who are you talking about?
It came from their office. So one of their secretaries that downloaded and sent us our agenda and our things for the meeting for February, this somehow got attached to one of them. But it only came to me. No one else got it. And it's funny because I went back to look for it today and now it disappeared out of my school email account.
Do you have a copy of it?
Yes, I do. It's sitting right in front of me.
Okay.
The attorney has a copy of it and the president has a copy of it.
And what does the attorney want you to say?
Well, when I went to bring it up to go into executive session, it didn't fall under any of the bullet points to go and the reasons to go into that. So basically comes back, basically the attorney wants to know who sent it, when it was sent, and things like that. And I'm not doing that. I'm not putting someone's job in jeopardy. I just want to know what we can do to make sure this never happens again. That was it. And the long about way, the attorney's letter to me was basically he wants to know who sent it. So I have signatures on it. There are no signatures on it. It's not even addressed to anybody. It says Bass River Elementary petition points. So, I don't even know if it's still circling, if it was something that was sent to the business administrators and it got filed and somehow wound up getting into our files that were being downloaded for our meetings. I don't know. And that's why I said last meeting, I would find it a little hard for any of the business administrators not to know about this if their secretary has it and it was sent out and I got it and downloaded in one of my agendas, part of the agenda.
And you don't want to, I guess you don't want to say what the petition is about.
I'll sit here and read it if you want me to. I mean, it's up to the board.
Well, yeah, it's up to the board, but I'm just, curious.
You want me to read it? I'll read it.
Well, yeah, but ask the rest of the board. But I mean, if it's that serious, I just think it.
Mrs. Pittsburgher, Mr. Fodor, let me jump in here. This is a document that somehow was sent to Mr. Fodor by somebody, I believe, from Pinelands.
No,
and again,
BA
Mr. Fodor, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fodor, from our emails back and forth. I just wanted to be sure I understood. You know who sent that email, but you don't want to say who sent it. And
no, I don't, because there's a whistleblower law, and I don't want to be on that end of a lawsuit.
Okay. But what the document is, it's an email, and it says Bass River Elementary petition point. And then it lists 11 points regarding the closure of the school and the feasibility study and the send-receive relationship, and concerns that these things happened a year ago. And now the person, whoever wrote this email, we don't know who wrote it. There's no signature on it. It doesn't come from somebody to anybody. We don't know if it's an actual petition that was circulated around in Bass River or in Pinelands or in Little Lake. We have no idea. It just says Bass River petition points, and it lists 11 concerns about legal actions the board took a year ago that's already done and over with. So I have no idea in terms of what, if I don't know the author and I don't know what the purpose of it is, and if I look at it and read it and it's complaining about something that was already done a year ago, I say that's not executive session action. It doesn't fall under any of the 7 points to go in executive session. But if the board wants to discuss it, if Mr. Fodor wants to provide all board members with a copy of this document he received, and let the board members review it, and then come back next board meeting and discuss it as new business, then that's fine. But I honestly don't want the board members, if they haven't read it, or if they have no idea really where it came from, or if Mr. Fodor's not willing to disclose where it came from, to discuss it without having all the information in front of you.
Well, I agree. That was kind of going to be my next question is, could we see a copy of it?
Of course
I can give everyone a copy of it, but now my question to Mr. Kalak is, I give the name of who sent this, and they find out it was sent, and she gets fired. What comes after me for being a whistleblower if this is something that was supposed to be?
I have no desire to know who sent it at all. That's not my point. We don't.
According to the
know
emails
who
you sent me, you do. According to the emails you sent me, you wanted to know who sent me it. So now you're saying no, but
if you want to discuss
yes.
it.
So which side of the fence are you on?
Mr. Fodor, if you want to discuss this particular matter, I think it's only fair that you give it to the board members and let them review it. And then at the next board meeting, you explain to them what your concerns are about this particular document. That's the easiest way we can go about it.
I agree with that. I mean, I can't really comment unless I see something. So, Mr. Fodor, if you want to send it to me so I can see exactly what it is, it's hard to comment on something that I have no information on.
I agree with that 100%. I will not send out who sent it to me. That will not be
and I'm not saying you should.
Because again, I'm not going to be on the end of a lawsuit if this is all just nothing and it's done and over with. But, you know, I don't want to be on the end of a lawsuit for the whistleblower law. I mean, I'm not going to be part of that. That's what I have an attorney for on the school board, to protect me. One statement, he says he doesn't want to know, and then in the emails, he does want to know. And the way he says it is, if I don't know who sent it, then how do you want me to do something about it? But tonight he's telling me he doesn't want to know who sent it. So,
Mr. Fodor, I'm not here to argue with you, Mr. Fodor, on your interpretation of many emails that we exchanged a couple weeks ago. All I'm telling you for now is that all I'm saying right now is that my interests are to protect the board. There is an issue that you have on a letter or an email that appears to be anonymous at this point. And it has concerns about actions that the board took legally a year ago. Okay, so if you want to bring that up in a discussion, please share it with all the board members, have a discussion with it in new business, and then we can have that talk. But if those other board members don't have it, and they don't realize what you're talking about, then I think it's unfair to the remainder of the board to have any discussion about it.
fine.
And by the way, it's not a complaint. It's not a legal document that was filed by anybody against the Board of Education.
Mrs. Adams replied to the chat. She said, Mr. Fodor, if you would like to share details to the rest of the board, then we can discuss it.
That's what I'll do, and I'll be removing myself for the evening from the meeting. I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you.
Okay. Give me one moment here. Mr. Schmidt is just taking note. Okay. We can move on to finance, item 11.
Number 11, finance. Motion to approve the following finance items as listed A through F. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
We will need a second. Can Mr. Schmidt second that motion, Mr. Kalak?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thanks, Bob. All right, first and second, and let's go with the roll call. Mrs. Adams, if you could reply yes or no to the chat. Mrs. Bittsberger.
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrichs.
Yes.
Looks like Mrs. Adams, she said yes to number 11. And Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Number 12, amend LRFP. Resolve that the Board of Education approve the minor amendment of the long-range facilities plan to the New Jersey Department of Education for review and departmental approval. Further, the board authorizes Garrison Architects to make this submission to the Department of Education on behalf of the district.
Motion.
Do we have a motion? Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you. So the long-range facilities plan, Mrs. Bittsberger, and for the rest of the board, this is the plan that we submit to the Department of Education. We're required to submit it. It's kind of our, exactly what it says, it's our long-range plan for our facilities, so our school building, including all kind of capital upgrades that we're going to make to the building. If we're going to be closing the school and selling it, then that has to be amended in our long-range facilities plan. It's a procedural step that we have to take and that we submit to the DOE for approval prior to us being able to unload this building in a sale. So this is a procedural step. Garrison Architects is just our architect who amends the long-range facility plan on our behalf and then submits it to the DOE. That's what this motion is for.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation.
No problem. Are there any questions related to that before we roll call vote? All right, Mrs. Adams, if you could reply to the chat. Mrs. Bittsberger.
Yes.
Mrs. Adams replied yes. Mr. Stoder absent. Mrs. Heinrichs.
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
That motion carries. All right, number 13, please.
Number 13, donation. Resolve that the Board of Education approve the donation of adaptive equipment for elementary school age children to the Little Lake Harbor School District.
Motion.
Second.
All right. Mrs. Adams asked, what is the adaptive equipment? Mrs. Adams, that's a great question. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer. Mrs. Heinrichs, are you familiar with what adaptive equipment is? Or you, Paul, that you might be able to? I know it's something for our special ed children in Little Lake Harbor.
It could be anything from mats to bands to big balls to scooters. It could be whatever they used in their adaptive PE classes.
Got it. And adaptive PE would be PE that is adapted to meet kind of the needs of that child who might have a disability or what have you?
Yeah, to meet their IEP. Yes.
Okay.
Are your physical education teachers trained in to use this adaptive equipment and how to work with special children?
I believe that they are, Mrs. Bittsberger. I think that that answer would be yes, but I don't know definitively. But I would.
You know, at Pinelands, there's also someone that comes in from the outside, someone contracted to do adaptive PA.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, the reason I asked the question is I did get my master's in that in therapeutic physical education, but I didn't have it in undergraduate school, and that's why I asked the question. But you've answered it. Thank you.
No problem.
Mrs. Adams has a question in the chat.
Mrs. Adams asked why she knew what adaptive equipment was. She was curious what the specific adaptive equipment is. I don't know that answer. And why is this a donation and not a purchase? I also will have to get that answer back to you, Mrs. Adams. I apologize. I'm not sure why we're donating this equipment instead of Little Lake Harbor purchasing it. I'm sure that Nick had a reason for that.
Was the Bass River residents given any priority in purchasing any of these things?
Ask that question again. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bisberger.
I was just wondering, and it's kind of in general, but adaptive equipment, I didn't know if it might be something that parents could use for an adaptive child or anything. But what I was wondering, because I heard a couple complaints, were Bass River residents notified of the sale of all that was going on in the school? Was Bass River alerted to this? I mean, how did you know that there was an auction going on or whatever it was, or however it was handled? Like, for example, I didn't know. How were people notified that these things were going to be available for sale?
Right, I believe that Nick did make some notices of how the items were going to be for sale. I'm not sure if it was posted on the board's website. You did hold some GovDeals auctions, which is a website where people can go on through GovDeals, other government entities, vendors, what have you, and make purchases of some of your materials and equipment. Some items were donated to the local community organizations. Some people did come in and request some things. So, I know that the info was definitely out there. I apologize that it didn't make its way to your corner of Bass River. Well,
it was out there, but for example, I'm a Bass River resident and I didn't know anything about it. And I just don't go to all these sites. I would go maybe to the Bass River Township site, but it's just a question. I did hear a couple of complaints from Bass River residents that they would have liked to have had first option to possibly purchase some of the items that were for sale. That's all.
Okay. All right. We are looking for a yes or no in the chat for you on item number 13, donation, Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Bitzberger.
Yes.
Mrs. Adams was a no in the chat. Mr. Foote is absent. Mrs. Heinrich?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
I abstain.
All right, that motion does not carry. Can you confirm that, Paul? I have 2 yeses, a no, an absent, and an abstention.
How many yeses did you have, John? 2 or 3?
2.
Okay, yeah, so that does not carry.
All right, item number 14, please, Mr. Schmidt.
14, website. Resolve that the Board of Education approve the attached proposals for website development and maintenance from Bill Curtin. Of a motion.
Motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Mrs. Adams, I see you replied yes in the chat. Are there any questions before we continue with roll call?
No, just a comment. Bill Curtin, I've seen the work that he's done on sites, and he does a great job.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Bitzberger.
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrich.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
That motion carries. All right, item number 15, please.
Number 15, request. Resolve that the Board of Education approve the purchase of the attached items by Eagleswood Township. So I have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All right, Mrs. Adams voted yes. Mrs. Bitzberger?
Yes.
Mrs. Heinrich?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
That motion carries. Item 16.
Number 16, public comment. The floor is now open to members of the public. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express with each statement made by a participant limited to 3 minutes as cited in policy number 0167.
All right, Mr. Bond, we'll hang here for a minute. Just please confirm that the phone number's up, and are there any people ready to call in?
The call number is up, and there is no callers.
Okay. So, Mr. Schmidt, I'll just give you a heads up. We'll wait here for 30 seconds, and I'll ask you just to move on to adjournment, number 19.
So do board forum next?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I skipped that. Yep, number 17, board forum. All right, we can move on to board forum, please.
17, board forum. Anybody have anything?
Is this the section that a board member can ask a question? Hello?
Yes, you can ask a question, or you can.
Well,
Yeah.
I had brought it up in the executive session, and then we got cut off. And it was about the possibility of getting a tax abatement on the sale of the school. I've talked to Jay, the tax assessor of Bass River Township, and he has never done one for Bass River Township, but he has done one for other towns. And what it is used for is to, if a business is going to buy a building, or it can also be for a developer, and if they're going to improve the building so that it can be set up for what they want to use it for, the town grants them an abatement, but the abatement has to be, you have to go through the procedure for the town to agree to an abatement before you can offer it to a person. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to know if there were any comments by the other board members on what they thought of this. And an abatement is a reduction in taxes for 5 years. Like, for example, it's an incentive. They want to buy it, and you throw in, you have an incentive for the first year, you'll only pay 20% of the taxes, second year 40, next year 60, and by the 5th year they're paying 100%. I just wanted to know if anybody thought about it or might be in favor of trying to get a tax abatement.
So during executive, when this came up, I did say that, and maybe you got cut off there, Mrs. Bitzberger, but
yeah,
I did confirm with Mr. K. Yeah, no problem. I did confirm with Mr. Kalak. The school district, I want to clarify, we don't provide abatements to anyone, and we don't pay taxes as the school district. We're a subdivision of the state of New Jersey, kind of a separate entity of the municipality, if you will. We charge them taxes for our school levy. If we were to sell the building that would, and any abatement for whoever purchases this building would come directly from the township, and the school district has no authority whatsoever over that process or procedure.
No, I know you don't have any jurisdiction over the procedure. All I'm saying is, can we talk to the commissioners to see how they feel about it? I mean, if they're 100% opposed, but you know, you have to talk to them, or somebody has to talk to them. As I said, I brought it up at a town meeting, and the commissioners just shoved me off and told me to go talk to the tax assessor. All I'm saying is towns do this to businesses. And, you know, you don't want to, all right. I guess you don't want to talk to the commissioners about it.
I don't know, Mr. Kalig, maybe you could help out. I don't know that it would be wise for us to have any representatives of the board approaching the township about providing an abatement for someone who had purchased a building from us.
Yeah, I mean, probably not good business practice, but again, if that's something that one of the board members is curious about in terms of how the process works, then ma'am, nobody's stopping you from going and talking to a commissioner about that. But if you do speak to the commissioner, just please note that you're doing it only as, you know, not as a representative of the board, because it doesn't seem like the board is approving of that. You know, it's just
okay. Well,
that's
what. Well, the commissioners are not going to listen to me unless the board supports it. So that's what I was asking. Would the board support, you know, trying to get an abatement on that property, especially if it's sold to a commercial or, you know, a rateable person?
Again, for purposes of discussion, you could more or less say a board member's okay with Ms. Spitzberger approaching the commissioners and just asking that question.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Bonnie? Ms. Heinrichs?
I'm fine with it too.
Mrs. Adams replied, on her own shore.
Pardon me?
Yeah. Oh, she's Ms. Adams saying on as an individual. So that wouldn't have the full support. You'd only have two people saying yes to it. So yeah, it would appear right now, Ms. Spitzberger, that you don't have full board support to go to speak to the supervisor as a representative of the board.
Okay, so I won't speak to anybody.
But you certainly can as an individual member, but just if you do, just please note that it's not on board authority.
Oppose a tax abatement?
I was fine with it being discussed, so I wasn't against it.
I was too.
Okay, so
Mrs. Adams did reply to you, Mrs. Spitzberger. She said, I believe the town would have to show interest. And it seems as if the town hasn't shown interest. I think she's just saying, you know, the town
nobody has ever applied in Bass River for a tax abatement. But it has to be approved. It's the township that has to approve it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think we all fully understand what you're saying. I'm not, like Mr. Kalak said, it seems right now it's just three other members of the board here and only two supporting you approaching the board as a board member. You don't have the full support of the board to approach them as a representative of the board.
Oh, no, okay.
So, Mrs. Bitzler, you could always bring that back up at next month's meeting if you want to talk about that, and maybe you have all board members present.
And I would, I guess is it no longer new business considered, Paul?
Well, I think it's all still part of board forum, right?
Yeah, okay. So we could bring this up, Mrs. Pittsburgher, during board forum at our next meeting.
Yeah, would there be how about if I tried to get the tax assessor to call in? So if you had questions, I mean, he's the one that can tell you the advantages, disadvantages, etc.
I think, Ms. Spitzberger, the best way to go about it is to get the board, pardon the phrase, fully on board with what you're trying to do before you bring the tax assessor in.
Oh, okay. All right. It's just that there may be questions and I'm not going to know the answers.
No, totally understood. But before bringing him in, I just want to make sure that the board as a whole would like that person to participate in the meeting.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No problem. Mr. Heinrich, do you have anything?
No. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Adams did reply, and she said as the vaccines are given, she looks forward to in-person meetings again, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I actually agree with her. I had such a tough time this evening, and it would just be nice. I mean, you know, we don't take up much room, and only have the in-person for people that have no problem. If somebody has a problem with attending in person, then let them call in. How about if you did that?
I agree. I'm looking forward to getting back to doing it in person.
I am too.
All right, Mr. Schmidt, do you have anything for board forum?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'd like to thank Mr. Brown for all the work he's doing over there. I walked through the school the other day with him, and I was really impressed at how clean and everything looks really good inside the school. I was really impressed.
I will pass the message along. I know he appreciates it. As I said, he is spending a lot of time over there, a few days a week, and he's also supervising, you know, the disposal of things, the sale, all the auctions. I did want to follow up with you, Mrs. Spitzberger. Mr. Bond did confirm that the auction items are on the very front page of the Bass River Board's website, so all the auctions were also listed there.
Okay, great.
Yep. And that's all I had for tonight. We can move on to number 19, adjournment.
Number 19, adjournment. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Just a reminder, our next meeting is April 27th, 2021, and we will have a special meeting to be held on March 25th at 4:30 p.m. to discuss the sale of the building. It will mostly be held in executive session, but of course open to the public for comments. And we will advertise that shortly. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
You too.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
good night, everyone.
Good night.